Okay.
Hello everybody and welcome to today's IEP Live Learn Lunch. I think this is number 92. We're really excited today to be joined by Adam and Shelley from Society Matters, who are going to be talking to us about apprenticeships and welfare support. So with no further ado, I'm going to pass you over. Thanks, guys.
Hello, good afternoon everybody. Welcome. Welcome to the first live lunch of the year. So that's really exciting. So you've got Adam and myself today who are going to talk you through apprenticeships and welfare support. So Adam and I are from Society Matters based up here in Gateshead, but we're both social welfare advisors as well. So we do give clients advice when we're not doing training and webinars. So today, like I say, we're going to have a look at apprenticeships and welfare support. Okay. So what we're going to look at today, so we're going to look at the facts and myths. So when it comes to apprentices and the benefits for employees, we're going to look at how we can support apprentices with welfare benefits and what challenges they face. We're going to have a look at some case studies about, how welfare benefits can support these apprentices. And we're going to look at some challenges apprentices can face. So that's what we're going to have a look at this lunchtime. Okay, so looking at some facts about, some facts about apprentices. So there's no upper age limit for becoming an apprentice. So I think people tend to think that, that they're for young only, but there's actually no upper age limit. 79% of employees said apprentices quickly deliver a positive return, for their investments. So, there's lots of positive things there. And the age profile of people starting apprenticeships changed between 2018 and 2019, and 2019 and 2020, with a higher proportion of starts from apprentices over the age of 24. So there's a high proportion, and there's an increase in the people that are, the older people, the slightly older people. I shouldn't use that word. So 47% of the apprenticeships started in 2009 were people aged 25 and over. And I think Adam's going to add some facts to that for you now.
Thanks, Shelley. Yes, so when it comes to apprenticeships, just some interesting trends and facts there. So there is no upper age limit, which a lot of people don't realise when it comes to an apprentice, although importantly, arrangements for funding do differ if you are aged over 24 years of age. There is a fair access to apprenticeships. So your age shouldn't affect whether you'll get onto an apprenticeship, and you shouldn't be discriminated against. So really important, that is the law. So as Shelley mentioned, in the first 2 quarters of 2020 to the academic year of 2021, there were 161,900 apprenticeship starts. So that is a drop of 18% for the same period the year before. And mostly that is due to the uncertainty that has obviously COVID has brought in. So 79% of employers have actually said that apprentices quickly deliver a positive return on investment, and 69% have said apprenticeships are an effective way of developing management skills as well. 92% have said that teamwork and interpersonal skills were improved by apprenticeship programs. So some positive statistics there. Now the age profile is changing, as Shelley mentioned. So 47% of apprenticeships that were started in 2019 were people that were aged 25 or over. Now stats have fallen for all ages, as we've mentioned, but it is starting to fall for younger age groups. So 26%, for example, there's been a drop of 26% of people that are age 17. The gender profile is also changing. So the number of women and men starting apprenticeships were almost the same level in 2019 and 2020. There's slightly more women that were starting as of 2019, so around 50.1%. So quite a small shift, but still significant. Now, 81% of starts in apprenticeships are usually in around 4 subjects. So business administration and law, health, public services and care, engineering, manufacturing technologies, and retail and commercial enterprise are the top 4 subject areas when it does come to starting apprenticeships. Thanks, Shelley.
Thanks, Adam. I was just laughing there because often Adam and I deliver training and I can sometimes forget to unmute myself. So I didn't that time. So that's just... Okay. So moving on from the facts, we've got the benefits of hiring an apprentice. So we have, so one of the benefits of, hiring them is 86% developed of employers said apprenticeships help them develop skills relevant to their organizations. 78% of employers said apprenticeships helped improve their productivity. And 74% of employers said apprenticeships help them improve the quality of their product or service. So Adam, have you got any other benefits you wanted to explore there?
Yeah, thanks, Shelley. Yeah, so some really good benefits would include things like you can adapt an apprentice's training according to the needs of your business. A lot of apprentices are really motivated to learn new skills as well. You can expand and upskill your workforce and make it more diverse. An employer can get help from the government to pay for apprenticeship training as well. So the amount does depend on whether you would pay the apprenticeship levy or not, or if you pay the levy, if you're an employer that has a payroll bill of over £3 million a year. As an employer that doesn't pay the apprenticeship levy, you could pay just 5% of cost towards the apprentice's training and assessments as well. The government will pay the rest up to what would be classed as the funding band maximum. There have been some changes during COVID, so more incentives. They are kind of evolving quite consistently, so I will put a link up in the end if there are employers that are looking to employ apprentices as well. So, for example, if you employ fewer than 50 employees, the government will pay up to 100% of the apprenticeship training costs, up to, again, the funding band maximum, especially for apprentices that are aged 16 to 18. And for apprentices that are aged 19 to 24 that have, an education, health and care plan that's provided by the local authority. In them circumstances, they may pay extra as well. So I will put the link up at the end, but there are extra incentives at the moment. And this is, again, about the government helping to get people back into employment. Thanks, Shelley.
Thanks, Adam. So some of the myths, that surrounds, there's quite a lot of myths that surround apprenticeships. And the first one is, Adam, that people tend to think, they're only for people that didn't do very well at school.
Yeah, so absolutely not true. So apprenticeships are another route into learning and employment that's available at many different levels. And we'll be looking at them in just a moment. So an apprentice may simply just want to get earning and get out into the workplace rather than going straight into university, which, as we know, can cost a lot more. An apprentice might like working on the job and not being stuck in a classroom, or, as we know, a lot of us working online all day. You can earn and learn at the same time. And you can learn from a variety of experienced people, meet new people, and progress up to university level apprenticeships as well. So, many different routes that you can take, Shelley.
Okay, a second one is that, that all apprenticeships are very poorly paid, or they're poorly paid.
Yeah, so another misconception, although in the first year, if they are on and we'll be looking at the minimum wages in just a moment, on an apprentice age and their age under 17, yes, the wages can be quite low, but just remember, employers are looking for the best talent to join the businesses quite often, and they will often pay more than what the minimum wage is for an apprentice. An apprentice may also be more likely to receive higher wages once they've qualified. And they won't have the large amounts of debt from tuition fees as well. So just obviously, when we do talk about university and the cost of these days, they are quite high, Shelley.
Yeah, another myth is, that once the apprentice starts in an employer, that they kind of get stuck in the same sector and they don't really progress.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the great things about an apprenticeship is the progression opportunity and potential to actually move up the ladder in different ways, especially when you're kind of learning on the job. So apprenticeships, you kind of never stop learning, and you can move what you're developing, valuable skills, into more advanced qualifications. And again, that can open up new job roles in different sectors. Perhaps you might start at level 1 and then progress into kind of specializing in a subject, so up to level 3, for example. So there is definitely an element and a possibility for progression. Absolutely, Shelley.
Okay, and you know, another thing that people tend to really think with apprenticeships is that they're only for school leavers.
Yeah, so as we mentioned at the beginning, the actual majority of people that start in apprenticeships now are people aged over 25. So 47% of apprenticeships that started in 2019 at the year 2019 to 2020 were actually people that were aged 25 and over. So again, people can't discriminate. We've got the Equality Act to stop that from happening. So you know, it's very much open to people that aren't school leavers and aged over 25 as well. Absolutely, Shelley.
Yeah, I think the final myth, you know, I have really is that, you know, a lot of people think, you know, you start an apprenticeship and it doesn't necessarily lead to a full-time job. You kind of get stuck in that apprenticeship and then they recruit a new apprentice to take your place.
Yeah, sometimes, Shelley, absolutely. I think the reality is, and the government figures show that 90% of apprentices stay in employment after their course ends, whether that's in the same sector, perhaps they move on to a different sector, and actually 67% remain with the same employer that they've trained with as well. So as employers, they've kind of invested in your skills for a minimum of 2 years. They're more likely to actually keep you on. As an apprentice, you're going to know the business arguably better than people that you know, will be coming in at a different level and starting afresh. And you know what the business's key values and structure is as well. So it makes good business sense to look after apprentices and enhance their skills in your business as well, Shelley, I think.
Brilliant, thanks, Adam. Okay, so just moving on, we're going to have a little look at the history of the apprenticeships in the UK. So I think when we think about apprenticeships in the UK, we think of them as a sort of recently modern thing, or, you know, we don't think about them dating back, but they actually were developed in the late Middle Ages, and they were supervised by craft, you know, guild and town governments. So they were, you know, so what would happen was a master craftsman was entitled to take on a young person. So it was like an inexpensive form of labor for them. So in exchange for, you know, taking them for food and lodging and taking them on and training them, you know, they got that sort of inexpensive labor. So most apprentices were males, but there were some female apprenticeships in those times. So they were things like seamstresses, you know, tailors, bakers and stationers. So there was, you know, there was some women, you know, female as well. So the apprentices started quite early. So it was usually between sort of 10 and 15 years old. And kind of because of that, there was often, you know, the apprentices' parents were involved in setting up the apprenticeship with the, you know, with the crafts person and getting involved in the contract. So most of the apprentices aspired to be craftspeople themselves on completion of the, you know, of the apprenticeship, but they lasted for 7 years. So quite a long time really that they lasted for. But some would spend time as journeymen, and a significant proportion would never go on actually to have their own crafts shop or, you know, their workshop. And because of this, in Coventry, to kind of, you know, incentivize people doing those 7 years, once you'd done that 7 years apprenticeship, you were actually entitled to become a freeman of the city. So that's a little bit, you know, about the history. So that they've been around a long time, apprenticeships. So what about today? So in 2015, in the Queen's speech, the government set out a target for 3 million new apprenticeships to start in England by 2020, with the pledge confirmed by the new government in 2017. So during the same period, the English Apprenticeship System, so there was some major reforms. So that was affecting the duration, the training requirements, the contracts, the technical level, and kind of the funding as well in particular. So the government introduced an apprenticeship levy across the UK, which I think Adam has mentioned before, which helps fund apprenticeship starts for large employees. So they were intended to help big businesses. So since April 2017, all UK employees with an annual bill of more than 3 million contribute 0.5% of their pay bill in excess of the threshold to the apprenticeship levy, which they can use for funding apprenticeships. So this is how the apprenticeship system looks today. So if we have a look at that, so I think Adam's going to give you a little bit more detail on those, how it looks today.
Actually, yes. So as part of the overhaul, if you can see on your screen there, so we do have level 2, so an intermediate level, so the equivalent of 5 GCSE passes at grade A star to C level. Then we've got the advanced level, so level 3, and that's the equivalent to 2 A-level passes or a level 3 diploma. Then you've got the higher level, so 4, 5, and 6 and 7, so foundation degree and above. And then you've got the degree level as well, so 6 and 7, and that's kind of a bachelor's or master's degree equivalent. So an apprentice should be paid for both their normal working hours and also training that's part of their apprenticeship as well. So that should be at least 20% of the normal working hours. There are rules about how many hours that you can work in a week and being paid overtime as well. So when it comes to the training, that should take place either at the place of work, it could be somewhere else like at a college or a training provider, or as we've seen an increase obviously at the moment, it could be online as well. Apprentices should be entitled to at least 20 days paid holiday per year, plus bank holidays. And if apprentices has been in local authority care, so if they're aged under 25 when they start their apprenticeship and they've previously been in local authority care, they might be eligible for a bursary payment as well. So just important to check that. When it comes to tax and national insurance, so as an apprentice, as everyone else, once you have income, you might have to pay tax and national insurance depending on how much that you earn as well. You should be entitled to the statutory benefits. So, you know, your statutory maternity pay, statutory paternity pay, maternity leave, paternity leave, sick pay entitlement. And again, as you mentioned, at least 20 days paid holiday per year as well. What's important to know, and we'll be looking at this and the effect of this in just a moment, and so earnings from apprenticeship will be treated just the same as earnings from any other kind of employment. So that needs to be taken into account, you know, when you're working out somebody's benefit entitlement as well. When it comes to an apprentice's rights, so apprentices are classed as employees, so you know, their apprenticeship contract does differ slightly from an ordinary employment contract, so it does actually give the apprentice extra rights, and it does give the employer extra obligations as well. So you know, they're allowed to join a trade union membership, they're allowed time off work for certain activities, guaranteed payments, you know, suspension on medical grounds, maternity rights, and obviously discrimination at work as well. When it comes to extra rights, they might be entitled to extra compensation if they have been dismissed, and they do have the right to be instructed as well when it comes to training. When it comes to apprentices and redundancy as well, so if an apprentice is made redundant before the apprenticeship comes to an end, the conditions for getting a redundancy payment are the same for other employees. So that means apprentices who have worked for employees for less than 2 years, unfortunately, won't qualify for a redundancy payment if it's been over 2 years, same as it would be for a normal employee. It might be possible for an apprentice who's made redundant to have the contract transferred to another employer, and we've seen a rise in that during COVID. If the employer could have kept the apprentice on and provided training but simply fails to do so, that could be a breach of contract and the apprentice could sue for that. An apprentice can only be assigned to another employer with the apprentice's consent as well. So this is quite common in some trades, and a lot of people don't realise that. When it comes to dismissal, an employer can't rightfully dismiss an apprentice unless the contract actually allows dismissal in specified circumstances, or the apprentice's behaviour makes it impossible to go on with that contract. So very specific when it comes to dismissal, very important to get apprentices support if you do see them struggling with their employer, but they do have extra protection as we've mentioned. Thanks, Shelley. Thanks,
Adam. So moving on, we're just going to have a look at, you know, the apprentice minimum wage. And like we mentioned earlier on, one of the myths, you know, or one of the things that people think about apprentices is that they're quite, you know, they can be quite poorly paid, you know, and that can be, you know, that can be the case, you know, if they're younger, as you can see by this slide, you know, that they get a poorer rate of pay, but it does increase. Adam, did you want to go into that in a little bit more detail?
Thanks, Shelley. Yes, you can see the current rates there in the left-hand side column. You can see they are increasing from the 1st of April 2022, and we'll be having a look at some case studies on how that can affect welfare benefits in just a moment. But as you can see, if you're aged under 19 or you're aged 19 or over and you're in the first year of your apprenticeship, it's quite a low wage to start off with. So this is why it's really important to get full benefit checks for apprentices when they are starting off. So if they are earning £4.81 an hour, it's very likely that they are going to need support from universal credit, for example. So we will look at some examples in a moment. So if they are making a new claim, as we know with the overhaul of the benefit system, it will be for universal credit. When it comes to universal credit, we need to bear in mind a lot of people that are doing apprenticeships might still be living with their parents and aged under 20 years old, so they might not get help with their housing costs in them circumstances. We need to take into account as well that it is classed as household income, so the wages that do come in. So there could be a reduction in the amount of housing benefit or the housing element of universal credit. For the household, it will be, they may be expected to contribute, especially in poorer households. So younger people in poverty, and obviously a lot of apprenticeships are aimed at people that might be put off at the moment for becoming an apprentice due to the effect on the household's benefit. So this is why it's really important before we get started, perhaps to get a full benefit check. Just to take into account as well, we have got a slight rise to the taper rate to universal credit, so you can earn a bit more before universal credit is deducted as part of the budget that came in November. But we do need to take into account inflation, energy bills at the moment, and there is a rise in national insurance that will be coming in as well. So if you were to earn £20,000 a year, you will be losing an extra £130 over the year, and obviously a lot of apprentices will be earning over £20,000 a year, especially with the increase of the wages. But for some apprentices, if they're earning under £9,564 a year, so that's around £797 a month, they won't have to pay that national insurance hike. So some apprentices obviously are going to be over that amount, some aren't, depending on hours, etc. Thanks, Shelley.
Thanks, Adam. So just having a look at a couple of case studies, how we can see how benefits can support these, people on apprenticeships. So we'll have a look at Malcolm. So Malcolm is 35 years old, he's single and he has no children. So he lives in a 1-bedroom private rented property and he's earning £6.75 per hour, and he's working 35 hours a week. His rent is £500 per calendar month. So currently Malcolm is in year 1 in doing an apprenticeship in the hospitality industry. So he has made an application for universal credit. So he gets, when he gets help with his housing costs, but that's, that's representative, of the housing costs in his area. So Malcolm brings in a wage of £996.58. His tax is £171.71. His housing costs, so this is where he gets the help from universal credit with his housing costs of £394.98. So with his wage and his housing costs, Malcolm has a total income of £1,168.29 per month. So, like Adam's talking about people doing apprenticeship, it's quite important that they do get a benefit check to see if they're entitled to any support. But in year 2 of his apprenticeship, his wage has increased to £9.50 an hour. So therefore, his UC payable after deductions goes down to £13.40 per month. So he gets that on top of his £1,330 wages. So his income still does increase in total to £1,343.40 per calendar month. So he isn't getting quite as much help with his housing costs because his wage has increased, but he does get a little bit support there. The next one is Ali and Fatima. So Ali's in his 2nd year, he's an apprenticeship, and he's earning £9.50 an hour. So Fatima's looking for work and engaging with a work coach. So they have a joint claim for universal credit, and she's doing, doing everything she needs to do, to fulfill her obligations of her universal credit, and she's trying to look for work. So both of them are 36 years old, and they have 2 children, who are 6 and 4, and they live in a 2-bedroom council property, which they rent at £90.50 per week. So the UC payable is £813.46 per month. So plus Ali's wages, they have a total income of £2,284.06 per month. So they get slightly more, they get slightly more help, as you can see on universal credit, because they do have those 2 children. So they will get the child element. So I think Adam's going to talk a little bit through about apprenticeships and the impact with universal credit.
Actually, yeah. So if you are aged 17 up until 25, or you are aged over 25 afterwards, and you do an apprenticeship, it's there's a good likelihood that you will be entitled to universal credit, depending on your earnings and your household. So you can see there's 2 examples: someone that's single, someone that has children, and the different elements of universal credit. There could be potentially some help with childcare as well, if Ali's partner was to find a job. So this is why it's really important whenever there's a change of circumstances, such as starting an apprenticeship or a rise in the wage, just to get a full benefit check, and a local citizen's advice or one of the benefit calculators, such as Untitled will be able to give you a good reading. If you think people are going to struggle with a benefit calculator, once you get through to your local citizen's advisor, a social welfare advisor will be able to conduct one within about 20 minutes, and they'll look at kind of if there's a council tax reduction, but quite often people are missing out, and this is something we always recommend, is just to get a full benefit check whenever there's a change in circumstances. So if you are getting universal credit, you will be asked to sign up to a claimant commitment. If you're doing an apprenticeship for more than 30 hours a week, you shouldn't be asked to do any work-related activity. So, communication is the key with the work coach. So that means you won't have to look for work. You just need to focus on your apprenticeship. If you've got childcare or caring responsibilities, or an illness or a disability that could make it hard for you to work them 30 hours, or your partner was to have to, that would be something that we need to communicate with the work coaches as well. If it was your partner, there may be an additional amount there for the limited capability for work-related activity element. So important to check. Now, if you're doing an apprenticeship for less than 30 hours a week, and you aren't in any of the groups that you're actually allowed to work fewer hours, you might be asked to work or do some work-related activity for other parts. So if it's not a registered or recognised apprenticeship, you might have to negotiate with your work coach and explain that your apprenticeship will help you find work in the future. It might be best to get specialist advice in them circumstances, as your work coach may, if there's a job that's coming up that pays more, may point you in the direction of going for that job, and you could be at risk from a sanction if they, for example, set up a job interview for you and you didn't turn up for it. If you've got children as well, obviously, as you saw in the example there should be the child element paid for your first 2 children. We do have the 2-child limit, which I know we've talked about a few times. So if you had a third or subsequent child that's born after the 6th of April 2017, unless one of the exception applies, so things such as multiple births, or you're a foster child, you might not get an additional amount, or more than likely you won't for a third or subsequent child that's born after that date. So again, a lot of families do struggle if that is the case. When it comes to, if you have disabled children, there could be additional amounts as well. So, for example, a severely disabled child could get an extra £402.41 added on to the universal credit. Again, they will need to be on a qualifying disability benefit. So really important to get a full benefit check. And also as well, really important to check help with housing costs as well. So an apprentice won't usually get help if they've got a mortgage or they're a homeowner, but they may well get help whether they're a social tenant or a private tenant as well. So again, really important to check that. When it comes to council tax as well, so as an apprentice, you might not have to pay as much council tax. So for example, if someone who lives with you is an apprentice or a youth trainee, you might be entitled to a 25% discount off your council tax. If there's only apprentices and trainees in a property, then there could be a 50% discount from council taxes as well. So really important to check if that is the case as well. Now, there is further support for apprentices that do have a disability or they've had an educational health plan as well. So we mentioned before there potentially could be a bursary payment to support them through their apprenticeship. All colleges, universities, and most large training providers do have staff members that are responsible for supporting disabled apprentices, for example. So they're usually called the learning support advisor or the disability advisor, for example. If you did have an education, health and care plan, and it's been shared with the college or university whilst you're doing your training, that could be there to help you with extra support. So that could be lots of different things. It could be specialist equipment like a voice activated computer. It could be sign language interpreters. It could be a digital recorder for keeping notes. It could be extra tutorial help as well. It could be things like moving the height of desks. It could be providing handouts in different color paper or larger font, for example. It could be allowing people extra time to complete assessments as well, or tests. So really important to get that checked as well. Now, under the Equality Act 2010, colleges, universities and training providers have to make reasonable adjustments for apprentices that perhaps do have a disability or a learning disability, for example. So that means that you shouldn't be discriminated against in the recruitment process or whilst you're working there or training there as well. So them changes should be to help you to learn. We've also got the Access to Work scheme as well. So that can cover all the agreed costs for anyone starting an apprenticeship. So that is a government scheme that is run by Job Centre Plus, and it can help apprentices again in a number of ways. So it can help with communication support, interviews. It could be, again, specialist equipment to suit the apprentice's needs. It could be a support worker or a job coach to help them in the workplace. Could be additional costs, so taxi fares if that person couldn't use public transport, or it could be training, disability awareness training for work colleagues as well. So quite a lot of things at work, access to work can help with as well that people may not be aware of. Thankfully.
Thanks very much, Adam. So finally, we're just going to, sorry, I went a bit too fast there. So finally, we're just going to have a little look at the challenges of apprenticeships. So availability, there's still a big shortage of, good quality, apprenticeships in the UK at the moment. As we've looked, the benefits, we've talked about a little bit this lunchtime, the benefit system doesn't support some apprentices as it should, and it can be quite tricky for them to navigate and things. So, that can be a drawback. It's quite a lack of information. So, sometimes there's not a lot of information out there about apprentices and, some of their rights and things. And obviously the effects of COVID-19 in this past, coming up to 2 years, and redundancies, they might be the first people to go in an organisation if they've had to cut back. And also because of the low wages, and the rising cost of living. So, the things like the fuel costs and, inflation and fuel prices. Adam, you're going to add a little bit detail there.
Thankfully, yeah, just so, in some sectors, there might not be enough apprenticeships to go around. So, it can be very difficult, for example, to get an apprenticeship with Jaguar Land Rover. It can be more difficult than it is to kind of get into University at Oxford, for example. So that, we may need more. I think it's important as well that employers are giving more support with understanding how the levy works and the benefits, perhaps more financial incentives. So, England's got relatively low levels of apprenticeships compared to some other countries such as Australia, Austria, Germany, Switzerland. They've all got between 3 or 4 more times than England. So I think we can still, invest more. The benefit system, again, we often need to think about the household income. Could that be improved for apprentices? Could it be a bit of a higher taper rate for them, perhaps while they're doing their first and second years? And we need to bear in mind, as you mentioned, the rising costs. We did lose the £20 uplift to universal credit, and that's hit people aged under 25 quite hard. So their standard element has decreased by a quarter, from £344 to £257.33. So, that at the moment is the equivalent of kind of, 3 days energy costs, that £20 uplift, or 3 days food cost in some circumstances as well. When it comes to earnings as well, obviously we do have that national insurance hike that's coming in. So as we mentioned before, that £20,000, once you get over that mark, and this is going to affect apprentices as well, you're going to be paying extra £130 a year. Half of businesses are struggling at the moment to recruit new staff. And when we think about that, you know, perhaps a bit more investment in apprenticeships would help fill them gaps. And a lot of people not sure about where to start as well, which I'll come to in a moment. And just to give you an example about them slumps, so apprentice chefs at the moment, they've dropped by about a quarter in the last year. So there really is a shortage at the moment. So more than half of young people in UCAS were looking into this, said that they would have considered an apprenticeship if they've had more information. And a poll of 2,000 people that were aged between 18 and 30 actually found that 52% of people would have considered an apprenticeship had more information being given. Careers support is quite sketchy. So when it comes to school and colleges, only 1% said that they received support that they needed to choose an apprenticeship. And that compares to almost 3 in 5 or 59% of people saying that the school had actually helped them with a university application. So I think, again, there needs to be more information available to people. Obviously, during COVID, we've seen a 30% drop in people starting apprenticeships, and that's quite understandable at the moment. With the job market, we know, you know, there's a lot of unpredictability that we need to take into account as well. A lot of people don't understand how the levy system works as well. So I think perhaps a bit of work with the government and employers and bridging them gaps would certainly help us as well. But it will be putting a lot of apprentices off at the moment, especially when we take into rising energy bills and the costs of living. Thanks, Shelley.
Thanks very much, Adam. Okay, so we've come to the end of our webinar on apprenticeships this lunchtime. So we're just going to move over to if there's any questions that you have. So thank you very much for joining both Adam and I hope you found that useful.
Excellent. Thank you both. It's been really, really interesting. We do have some questions in already, and I would just invite those who haven't submitted a question to use this time maybe to think and type their question in. So let me just make sure I'm going back and we're not going to miss any. So we had a question from, let me see. I had it there and I've just moved it. Okay, so if you have a level 3 qualification, can you still apply for an apprenticeship at level 3, or would you need to go to level 4?
I think there certainly wouldn't be funding from the government. It would depend on your age group, Kerry, and perhaps what the qualification was as well. You know, what sector you worked in. Again, we need to think about bursaries as well. If people have had an educational healthcare plan, in some circumstances there might be some support. So it would depend on your age group and also what you've done in the past as well, perhaps what sector. There's quite a lot that could come into play there. There is a lot of incentives for certain types of work. So for example, you know, there's a large shortage at the moment of people doing long distance. Lorry driving, for example, would be a prime example. So the government are doing incentives of driving schools for people, would be a good example. So it does depend on the sector. I wouldn't write off if you've already been in one sector or you're wanting to do something completely different. But I will put the government information in the chat there for you, Kerry, to have a look through. Again, it might be worth having a chat with certain different companies that you'd be interested in. There may be some sponsorship and also help with costs if you have to move to a certain area as well. So I wouldn't write off if that is an idea for a client or for yourself. Definitely worth exploring.
Excellent, thank you very much. So our next question is from Nigel. How do European school leavers certificates figure in this? Often there is a multi-page report that covers all their educational journey until they leave education, sometimes including degrees.
Well, certainly not my field of expertise, sorry, Nigel, but when it comes to certification, again, I will put up the government's information. I wouldn't know when it comes to, I wouldn't like to comment when it comes to European school leavers certificates. I know it can be tricky sometimes, but yeah, I'll find the government information for you there, Nigel.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Adam. I always love it when they fox us with questions that we can't answer. It always makes for a good session, doesn't it? Okay, so Katya says, would you say there are incentives and benefits for developing apprenticeships within a business when pitching to directors?
Yes, I think more can be done by the government, in my personal opinion. And I know one of the major reasons is the way that it's communicated. There has been a lot of changes during the pandemic, so we've seen extra incentives during both budgets this year. But I think when it comes to sitting down and having the guidance to actually find out how you go about bringing an apprentice in. I did watch one video that was put up and it was really overcomplicated. It was like a 20-minute video by the DWP and the government, just kind of going through how to do it. So I do think that there needs to be, not just more incentives, perhaps higher payments, but also as well, just going to employees and saying, look, we can help you with this, if that makes sense. Because myself, I'm just reading through the guidance, I know I really struggle with technology myself, and I'm terrible with filling kind of complicated online forms and going through myself. So if you had someone that would help with bridging that support, I think that would be very beneficial. But again, I will put the government guidance in there for you that you may find useful. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And Nigel has said thank you for that answer to his question. That is all the questions we've got in at the moment. So if let's just see, we'll give people a few more seconds to, I can see that, well, that was very quick, Adam, to talk and get the link at the same time. Impressive stuff. I can tell this isn't your first time out. Brilliant. Okay, so if we haven't got any more questions, we can wrap the session up there. It has been really interesting and engaging, and it's always useful. And as I've said, we are going to share this recording, aren't we, via the YouTube channel later today, hopefully. I'm being a bit it depends on how quickly I can get that up and get it shared. So Holly has said thank you for the session, very informative, as has Nigel and Dahlia. Yeah, they're all, I can't keep up with everyone now saying thank you. It has been a wonderful session, so thank you very, very much for that, for both of you. I'm sure we will be having Society Matters and the team back with us again over the next coming months. Not straight away, I'll let you both have a rest, but we always have a great informative session. And Shannon said she's learned a lot, and as have I. It's always useful to know. Thank you so much for this. Thank you everyone who has attended today's session. It's been really great to have you all back. We're not here next week. We've only just come back and we're not here next week because it's the IEP special general meeting, which is taking place at lunchtime next week. But we will be here the following week on the 26th of January with Learning Curve Group, who will be taking us through a session on coaching conversation. So it's going to be a good one. It's a bit different from today. So now we've got some technical knowledge that we can use. We're going to move on and look at some skills-based knowledge that we can use around coaching conversation. So please do join us for that. It's good to see people are already saying they're looking forward to it. That's fantastic. All of our sessions are advertised through our Learning Network e-bulletin. If you haven't already subscribed to that, if you are new to the IEP, because there's lots of new names, if you're a new member, have a look for it. It comes out every Wednesday morning. If you're an existing member, just make sure you're having a look, because we are releasing our schedule for the coming weeks. If you don't receive it at the moment and you'd like to, pop over to the IEP website and you can send an email through to us, and you can request to be added to our mailing list, and we will get you added. And Melissa, I can see that you've put, can you please add me to your mailing list? And you get the emails forwarded to by your manager too late. Absolutely, Melissa, I will get that done for you. And it might be worth, if you've got any colleagues who would like to receive that and they're not at the moment, drop me an email. It's helen.lee@iemployability.org, and I will pop that in the chat. and I will make sure we get them added to our mailing list. So let me pop that in for you. Thank you everyone for attending today. It's always great to have you here. Thank you again to Adam and Shelley. Just making sure I can't type and speak at the same time. Make sure I'm spelling my email right. It's wonderful to have you here. It's great. It's a great session to start back, and I look forward to seeing you again at the next session. I'm going to stop the recording now. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Be here.
Thank you. Bye-bye.